like instead of just raising your score like you would in most Euro games, you're like reducing the loss you're taking. So like in effect of what you're doing, it's really not that different from your average Euro game. It just makes you feel like you're being punished the whole time you're doing it. Like the only thing that's just outright dickish is there's one spot that lets you steal resources from somebody. And then there's a spot that's just like, I'm going to roll a dice, and that's the number of penalty points I get to assign to people. Mm-hmm. Oh, look, I rolled a 3. Let's see, I could give everyone 1. Or now you're in the lead, you take all 3. But
yeah, I remember you telling me about that.
It's just it's a highly interactive medium Euro, but it's not like anything substantially different.
Yeah.
Other than that.
Hello.
Mm-hmm. Hey, TC, there you are, dude.
Oh God, did we survive today?
Well, we're here in. We just keep on like flooding over here. Is that what it's like for you guys over there?
Oh yeah, we're always in a state of constant flood over here. I've got like sump pumps pumping and.
Well, did you get an ecological disaster? Because we got that.
Oh no! Well,
did you hear about that one, Joe?
Which one are you referring to?
The train.
What did we end up with a train going off the rails or something because of the?
No. Well, they're not sure what caused it, but yeah, we had a train derail. Because of the flooding, the floodwaters were near the tracks, and it was an oil train. So all of the oil's going in the floodwater. Like they're seriously trying to figure out how to cut it off before it gets to the Missouri River and like all through Iowa. Because it was like around the Sioux River, like Sioux City around there.
Jeez.
But no, oil's safe. These things never happen. Never. If it was a pipeline, it would have been fine. That's the way they're going. Yeah.
The big thing over here is that we had a bunch of protesters actually successfully shut down the ICE offices over here.
Ooh, nice.
They just camped out right in front of them and didn't let them in. And it's been shut down for the past 2 days.
Yeah.
I know this because I was driving back from game night and I ran right into them and I had to figure out a way to get home. I had to figure out they're like, why is the traffic so bad? It's like 9:30 at night. What's going? There's all these people here. Oh, it's the ICE offices. That's where they are. Huh. Okay.
I can see that happening in Portland.
We have Norm is here. If you guys click on the pop-out chat, I just shared it. And we got Murr as well. So welcome, Norm.
Good to hear from you guys. It's been a crappy week and it's only Monday, so it's nice to talk to some nice people.
Sorry to hear about that, TC, man. You got a long week.
You're gonna talk to nice people and you have me on? Are you sure?
Well, I appreciate your brand of sarcasm. It's refreshing, especially after we were short at work and everybody's like, "Oh, I'm sorry," and all apologetic. It's nice to have somebody who's a little more assertive.
Yeah.
Hey, Andy, has your board game collection grown to the point that you have to store it in cardboard boxes?
Oh no, not yet.
Okay, so I got the Papa. Yeah, we got Mura. We've got
Papa chat.
Yeah, there's Norm. Cool. Nice.
Although I do have was it Union versus Central sitting in a plastic bag because I haven't made a box for it yet.
Nice.
That was a fun one.
You do know you can get boxes at GMT.
Yeah, but
boxes.
That's actually true, and they're pretty nice quality.
They are, but I feel like putting the dinky little card game in a GMT box would be.
Yeah, that'd be great. It's this giant box, like here we go.
Nate and I tried Union versus Central, and we kind of Care Beared it because it was our first play for both of us.
Isn't that one that can be longer, like can be quite a long game, or am I thinking?
Oh, yeah. No, like the short game is 3 hours, and it's a card game. But we were looking at like all the cards before we played them and looked at them. We're like, oh my God, you can be so horrible to each other in this game. You're like, oh, look, you built that cool tracks on the mountain, landslide. Oh, you had a train there too. Oh, that sucks.
Yeah, how unfortunate. Andy really feels bad.
Well, that's why it only took us 2 hours, is because we weren't like messing with each other as bad as we could have.
Yeah. That one, I'm kind of interested about that one.
It's weird. It was fun though. It's got a vaguely Roads and Boatish feel because it's a logistics game. It's just your logistics move left and right.
Oh.
Oh, hey, Joe, before we start, I just finished watching The Ritual, and that is the craziest monster I've seen in a long time.
Okay. Yeah, I didn't even want to tell you. I didn't even want to like tell you that it was a monster. It's like I didn't want to spoil anything. So
oh, it was great. Like there's this big trembling in the woods, and like this guy's wife just walks out. I'm like, what is going on?
Yeah, kind of like the movie Annihilation. I think that what I think they're finding more and more is that like if you can make a monster, like a horror movie monster, which is kind of what TC is referring to in the movie The Ritual on Netflix, if you can make it so that it has like pieces that are like that confuse your brain into thinking it should be human, like that, I think that that's like the key to, you got to give something somebody tries to relate with, you know, so that you can see it sort of like, you know, in an improper form that makes it very unsettling.
Yeah, so I looked up who like designed that particular monster, and it's a guy who works with Guillermo del Toro, and he worked with him on Crimson Peak and a few other stuff. And The Strain, I was like, oh, makes sense, because that was really messed up and cool.
Yeah. I remember Crimson Peak, man. That movie almost got like no attention. I watched it, and it wasn't like one of my favorite movies. Do you like it, right, TC?
Yeah, I managed to take Chris to go see it because I had Tom Hiddleston in it, and she really likes Tom Hiddleston. And he proceeded, like in that movie, to pull a knife out of his face for about 8 minutes. And it was like the most unnecessary knife pull out of your face I've ever seen. It was pretty cool. Yeah. Just like, just on and on. I liked it. And Chris liked it because it's like a gothic horror story. So
sure,
it was good. It wasn't the best thing, but it was that year. At least it was something different, you know.
The only thing that angers me in horror movies is jump scares. If they do jump scares, I'm like, all right, you're off. Not because I like necessarily hate that. I'm just like, it feels too cheap.
It's cheap. Yeah, it can be really cheap. I mean, it just depends. Like, depends on what the jump scare is going for. But yeah, usually if they're relying on jump scares primarily, it's not going to be something any horror movie buff is looking for.
Yeah, see, like if I want to watch something like that, like a horror movie, I want ones that are like not the blood and guts and not the jump scare, but the actual just, I'm going to creep you the hell out.
You like need somebody
looking Andy.
Oh, I watched Annihilation. Yeah,
Andy, we're playing nothing but code names today.
Yeah.
No jump scares in that.
No.
This pain and suffering.
I was thinking that once we got done with our first game of code names, we could play a second and a third and a fourth.
No, you play different. We're going to play Disney code names. We're going to play code names. Just different versions. It just never ends. Just think, okay, just one more iteration. No, there's another one. And another.
Yeah. Kids went to bed. Code names after dark. Woohoo!
Yeah. I'm going to go to bed with the kids. I can't. I still got to go. No.
Well, it can't be any worse than that. The time I was at my mother-in-law's, and she just pulled like a box of trivia questions out of some trivia game, and was just asking people them. Which I don't know. It's a trivia game. It could go either way. And then she would come around to me and just be like, "Pass, pass." And then at some point she was like, well, we don't have to do this if you're not having fun. And my wife's like, he just doesn't know any of the answers. It's like, ask him the science category or he's just going to say pass.
That's funny.
Okay.
Like,
TC's going to be the host for tonight. So yeah, whenever.
Keep in mind, I've played 1846 twice, and that is my entire repertoire of 18XX games. So,
no, that's pretty good because like the take we're planning on doing here is like, okay, so you've caught the 18XX bug. Now what?
Yeah. And I know that 1830s like the genesis for all that. I know who designed it. And we're going to go from there.
Yeah.
And I'm going to just enjoy sitting here talking to my friends and not being at work.
I can probably provide some color commentary. No expert commentary at all, though. Just color commentary.
If it's all just color commentary, I'm fine. I really don't care right now. I'm just sitting on my butt.
Like you hear that rubber ducky squeak in the background, or oh no, that's TC. Ooh, sorry. Hey TC.
Hey, between Joe's nightmare with the website and me trying to get through, it was so funny. Joe's like texted me like, "I got all this crap." I'm like, "You want to cut colon tissue with me instead?"
Yeah. I didn't mean to bug you there, TC.
Oh, that's fine.
The time difference, I'm always like, I think because when I texted you, I thought it was like 9:15 or 9:10 this our time, and I was like, maybe TC's like, just getting to work, or maybe he's still at home. Like I figured it's like 7:15, but I didn't realize that like you were already at work at like 7:15 your time.
Yeah, I get there pretty early, but I was in the middle of some gross stuff, and I'm just like, hey, if you don't want to bother that and come drive all the way up here and join me for work, I'm cool with that. Maybe
I'm just glad you could make it, dude. I'm really glad, and I'm glad that Andy could be here too, because he wasn't feeling the greatest, So
we're just going to.
Coincidentally enough, stomach flu, colon tissue. They're connected.
There you go. Yeah, I know someone who can remove that for you, and I can cut it up and put it on slides, and that make you feel better.
Honestly, at this point, if someone came to me and they're like, "We need we want to, do human trials on a cyborg digestive system. We're just going to replace." I'd be like, done.
Yank it out. I am finished pooping for the rest of my life.
No. It still poops. It's just like there's this, you just have like a remote so you can do it when you need it to.
Oh, this is gonna be one of those. Oh, and you got a shirt on. Okay. I think we're gonna. Oh, this is gonna either be the worst episode of the Long View or the greatest. I have no idea how this is gonna go, so this is gonna be awesome.
Yeah, I hadn't been visualizing my own colon enough, Andy, and thank you for that. Like now, I've got my head right down in there. I'm on the magic school bus.
I kind of want a problem that's bad enough to have to put one of those cameras through, just so I can have that forever.
You actually desire a colonoscopy? Like, is that what you're like dreaming of right now? Like,
no. You don't have to worry about it. They give you this medicine that kills your short-term memory.
So you actually want to be sort of like
no. I don't want that. I want them to give you the pill. Like the little pill that's a camera robot. So it's just like I can watch it like start, and it's like all the way through the system.
Andy, I don't know the stuff.
You will not be able to unsee what you see if you do that.
It sounds like something that we've developed. Yeah, I'll go with it. And
that's Andy, where the horrors of the www.isthisactuallywebsite.com in college. There's things I need to unsee.
Wow. Well, TC.
Well, now that we've done with the colon, let's go ahead and start the episode, shall we? We're on such a great foot.
Why?
Okay, here we go. 5, 4. Don't think about your colon. 3, 2, 1. Welcome to a new episode of The Long View. Tonight, I am bringing a really good friend of mine on to talk about train games, and that's not Joe. Tonight we've got Andrew Denison from The Good, the Bored, and the Ugly, one of my fellow co-hosts from that podcast. Hi, Andy.
Hey, nice to see everybody.
Yeah, it looks like you're still unpacking or packing. I have no idea what's going on over there.
Just stuff from my classroom. I don't know what to do with it.
Well, we can burn it.
Yeah, that's about right.
And joining me to discuss train games tonight is my second best friend.
The second best friend.
Second best friend
who's joining you tonight, right? This time the second best friend who's joining you tonight, please.
We got Joe Salad. Hey, Joe!
Choo!
Yeah,
ready to go.
All 18XX all the time. In fact, maybe we'll just forget about calling it the Long View and calling it 18XX View or something. But before we get into rebranding our podcast, we should mention that the people who are supporting our podcast is Game Surplus. yes, at Game Surplus, you can probably get some of the games we're talking about. Although, knowing some of the games that Andy's going to talk about, none of us are going to be able to get them because he made them himself from spare parts in his house. But
I've been doing that a lot lately, actually.
But Carmen over there at Game Surplus, he's pretty good at getting some hard to find Euros and some decent war games. And man, he does a great job. And he's just a really cool guy to hang out with. And I've been a shill for him for a long time. So grab a game, you want to get it, want to look for it, go to Game Surplus. I know Joe wants to talk about because he loves them too. Hey, Joe, why don't you talk about some Game Surplus with me?
Well, that's the word, man. That Game Surplus has got this. They got the goods. They do. And recently there was oh boy, it was one that you were really excited about, TC, a GMT game that they would just started stocking, which is
it Cataclysm?
No,
Fort Sumner?
Fort Sumner. Yes, Fort Sumner.
Yes, I knew that because I support Game Surplus. Yeah,
I'm gonna be hipster. I'll be like, I ordered from Game Surplus before it was cool.
But
yeah,
yes.
I ordered from Game Surplus before it was Game Surplus. It was Game Not Surplus.
Yeah, it was gaming shortage. The only place to buy board games on the internet.
Back in my days, the only place you could buy board games was Game Surplus, and we were happy about it.
I ordered for them where you had to send an email in German still. No.
We had to write a letter and mail it. That's how long ago it was. You had to send a money order in that.
Yeah, the good old money order.
But only a postal money order.
Some of the games we're talking about tonight actually are paid for by money orders, right? Right, Andy? Aren't some of these 18xx games sold through some of these distributors?
Yeah, you do get the ones through Winsome Games that you have to be on some magic list and get an email and a post office money order and.
Oh wow! I thought war gamers were backwards, man. That's like we're gonna give it for them. We play by email when we do war games. Yeah, us 18xers, we go beyond that. We did it by mail.
Yeah, and then you get something that a paper map with like construction paper shares.
So in case you've been caught the vibe, we will be discussing just 18xx games in general, I'm believing. And sounded like, Andy, you want to talk about you experienced an 18xx game and where to go from there. Now, a little history here. 18xx games was initially one game called 1830, correct?
1829, actually.
I was a year off. Sorry.
The first one. 1830 is the one that people still play, though.
1830 came out after that, but yeah, it improved upon a lot of things with 1829. It's kind of considered, from what I hear on most people, kind of like as the real progenitor of the series.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it was published, I believe, by Avalon Hill, or it was republished by, and that's when it really got a lot of exposure that way. And in fact, that's kind of funny. If you look like the Avalon Hill catalog for that particular, it's like war game, weird 18xx game, war game. It's like, where the heck?
What GMT is like these days too, though. Now.
And what's crazy is that, from what I understand, also that particular printing of 1830 is used for the components are used that for some other Winsome games.
Right.
Like I remember someone showed me a Winsome game and it said, like, take the components from 1830 and use them with this game. It's like, okay, guess you need that. And still to this day, it sounds like that printing's still the one to go to, even though Mayfair did attempt a reprint of it at some point.
Attempt's a good term.
I guess I'm trying to be polite, trying to be correct. So why don't you discuss a little bit what an 18xx game is, and we can go from there. So go, Andy, and Joe, please provide some commentary. I'm looking forward to the colorful commentary.
Yeah. So 18xx is a system of games. It kind of started with 1829. Now it's 1830. Generally, there's going to be a set of things you can expect in pretty much any 18xx game. There's going to be two kinds of alternating rounds. One's going to be share rounds. During these rounds, you buy shares in companies, you start companies, that kind of thing. And then you get your money to run the company in one way or another. Those then basically alternate with what's called operating rounds. And then depending on the game you're playing, you may have 1, 2, or maybe even up to 3 of those before a share round comes again. In an operating round, you're going to be running your company. Now, that's kind of the big difference, and one of the things I think that people struggle with who have never seen one of these before, but you are not the company. You are investors running that company. And so the company has its own money separate from you. You can start with a company that you may not own later due to various mechanisms that can occur depending, once again, on the games. But generally,
or people.
Or people. I mean, you want to be. But in the operating round, you're generally going to be doing something called laying track. And you'll get these little hexagons with the route on it. You'll put those down on a map board. Then you can do what's called laying tokens, because if you put down some of these track tiles, they're going to have cities. You can token those cities to kind of lay claim to them, keep people from running through them. It can be a blocking mechanism. You're gonna find a route for whatever train you have. Trains take various forms, but generally they allow you to run a certain number of stops or hexes or something. You add up the money from this, and then generally you're given 2 options. You can either pay out the money as dividends, and so usually in a company you have shares of stock. Each stock gets so much money. And then generally that's going to improve your stock value. Or you can withhold the money. So you can take all the money into the company's treasury, which you might need to do at some point to be able to afford more trains or other things. But when you do that, your stock value drops. And so generally the goal of every 18xx game is the person who has the most money wins. So you kind of want the most valuable stock. You want the companies that are paying out, that kind of thing. Now, basically then built off this base system, there's almost an infinite variety of things that are done. And that's kind of some of those I'll go into later tonight. But that's kind of the high level general overview of what you're going to get in your typical 18xx game. You can pretty much expect those things to be there in most situations.
Yeah, and it's interesting that you generally in most, at least the one game I played, you play till the bank is completely broke. And whoever has the most money wins. You can drag that out for as long or as short as you want it to be. But I think you really hit on the point that at least with the first game I played of that, it took me a while to realize that I wasn't the company, that I wanted to invest, and that was a really key into getting a good winning the game, is realizing, hey, I'm invested in this. I don't typically own it. And if I can just shrug this off on somebody else who, so there's a lot of gameplay in that. So that's pretty interesting. But one of the things I wanted to ask you in particular is, so what would be a good first one to start with? Because I started with 1846, and I hear a lot of that's okay, that's good, it's not a real 18xx, it's too much. I mean, it's
like coin's not a war game.
Because there's such a passionate base for these games that everybody has like their own thing they lob onto that they like. And so I think it's an important thing to go into is like what you would kind of recommend, and maybe not just one game in particular, but maybe a range of things depending on, because I'm telling you what, right now, if I wanted to move from 1846, I have no idea where to go from here.
Yeah, and that's kind of where I wanted to take this episode, because I think there's been podcasts that I listen to and other things that, and even I believe there's a Longview episode kind of around that idea too, of, so you want to try 18xx, what do you do? But what I've seen more and more on the forums these days, BGG and other things, is, so I've played 46. Now what?
Yeah.
There's like, where do I go from there? Anyway, I think for introductory games, I've played three types so far that I would consider introductory games. That would be 1846, 18AL, and 1889 that I think are kind of more of the introductory games.
What makes them more introductory? I mean, I know like I've been told that 1846 is the draft at the beginning instead of bidding for the company. Right. Not you bid for something. Well, I don't know what it's called. They were like, were they minor companies? Anyway, you drafted them instead of bidding for them.
Right. Yeah. Well, 1846 is it's probably the least like, out of the introductory games that I know of, it's the least like the core system, but it's kind of the closest to more of like a Euro game sensibility. So where they consider 1846 to be a good intro is if you've got a lot of Eurogamer friends that are not used to highly interactive games and stuff, that this is kind of one to maybe ease them in a little bit more. Because generally in 18xx, there's kind of two main branches of the genre. There is the what's called the run good company style of game, which 46 would be an example of, where there's less like stabby. There's really like dumping a company is not something you would normally consider doing in a run goods companies game. Generally, your goal is to take your company and do the best you can with it. They tend to be a little bit more about optimization than they are about sort of brinksmanship. Mm-hmm. And so 46 falls in that variety. It's really like make the most efficient money-making route you can, so on and so on. The other ones I've played 18AL once, which from what I've been told from some people is that's all you really need to play 18AL for. Mainly because just in that one play, I can see where people are getting from it. It follows pretty much the exact 1830 core set of rules, except that, you know, in a lot of these games, you have private companies, which is what you talked about drafting in 1846.
Thank you, private companies. Yeah, I knew it was right.
Something. These private companies have nicer abilities than what I think 1830 does. 1830, the private companies like, I'm just looking at the payout, man. Like the abilities are boring. But in 18AL, it was pretty easy to go, okay, I won this private. That means I should start this company and I should build the route this way. And there wouldn't be much difference in how you would do that other than you got a different private company, which would have this other sort of obvious thing you should be doing. 1889 is what I considered to be the go-to teaching game if you're really wanting to show someone what 18xx kind of really is, because it follows pretty much, once again, the base 1830 rule set. But it's not quite as brutal as 1830 itself is. You can also finish it in a much more reasonable time. 1830 generally can go for, it's a good 5-6 hour game generally, unless you're playing with near max player count, then it tends to be over real quick when someone goes bankrupt. But 1889, it's still tight. It's still got some of that edge and nastiness of 1830, but it just kind of loosens it up just a little bit and gives it to you in about a 4-hour package, which is about as quick as you can hope for in most 18xx games. But it's got all the meanness in there. Like there's reasons to dump companies on people. You're going to buy these trains, and what I didn't mention kind of in the high level overview is eventually you're going to have your trains rust, is what they call it, or become obsolete. They're removed from the game. Now in 1846, they have what they call a gentle rust.
Yeah, you see it coming.
Yeah, well, and once it happens, you still got to run the trains one more time. So maybe you can then withhold and buy the new train and not be out of luck. Whereas in 1889, it's like, nope, your trains are gone. Should have planned better.
And what was funny in 1846 is even though I was told and I knew that was they called it gentle rust, it still felt pretty harsh. And and that makes me want to ask a very important question to you. Is like, I keep hearing, I hear this from a lot of people, that 1830 is a very mean game. Anything with the title Robber Barons in it should be, right? I mean, it's right there in the title. But what I don't hear is what are the mechanisms in 1830 specifically that make it mean? So that when we're talking about a mean 18x, what exactly that entails.
Right. So then the quote unquote mean games are generally focused more on the financial and stock market aspects of the game, not so much in building the most efficient routes. So the way I guess I can describe the meanness of 1830 is a good example of, I believe this is a 4-player game I was in. We all started our companies. We had enough money. We kind of played careful in the private auction where we all started a company. In a couple ORs we ran, we got some more money. And then we started buying shares in each other's companies. Then we're all kind of looking at each other and going, there's going to be a real bad cascade effect here in a minute. Because ideally you're wanting to start more than one company. Mm-hmm. So yeah, about another OR or two after that, we just start dumping the shares we had bought of each other's company. So literally like all the players at the table did that. Like we just destroyed the stock value of every company that started in that game because every time you sell a share, your stock drops. So it's like, I'm selling 2 shares a year. Okay, well, I'm selling 3 shares a trade.
The market just
selling 4 shares. Yeah. So yeah, the economy just like, and then we started all these new companies using all the capital from screwing each other. And it kind of went on from there, but that's one way it's mean. The other way that can be particularly mean is, let's say I can get 2 companies going, right? Well, you can trade assets between companies. So you can set up a situation in such a way of, say, Joe's playing, he buys 2 shares in a company that seems to be doing real well for me. Okay, well, that's probably a safe investment. It's doing really well for him. And then I start this other company, sell my train and my money and all my assets to this new company. And then basically the stock round starts and I go, oh man, Joe, I have priority deal. Here, you can have this company that was really good, except now it doesn't have a train or any money to buy one.
And then so you're stuck with a company that can't generate revenue since it doesn't have a train. And for it to get revenue, you probably have to spend money from your own personal supply to get it going. And by that point, since money accumulated, personal wealth, we should point out, is personal wealth, not how much money the company makes, how much money you can leech off these companies. And so you get someone behind the 8 ball, and that can be pretty harsh in my understanding, because you can't recover for something like that because someone's so far ahead and you're just starting from scratch with only trying to pushing this boulder up a hill, for lack of a better word, but that you threw on someone to crush them. They're like, it's like,
but that kind of thing, I think, to a lot of 18xxers is kind of amusing. Like, there was once when I was teaching, I think Joe was in this game, and a friend of ours, John, who used to be on the Good, the Bored, and the Ugly. And I was teaching John 1889. And I was playing very loose, like not trying to do real well, just finagling around, just trying to let him learn the system. And Joe noticed there was a way, like he basically dumped a company on me with no train. I had to buy a diesel train.
Yeah. And these trains get more expensive the more advanced they get.
Right. And a diesel was like, it hurt. But the thing that was beautiful was John looked down at the company he was running and he was like, I could do that too. And so like they dumped it on me. And so I ended up buying 2 diesel trains for these stupid companies that they had dumped on me, running them once. And then I didn't hardly have any capital. So the next stock round, they're like, oh, I could just buy that company back. And now it has a diesel train.
Yeah.
And so, leaving me with like, $500 and like 3 shares of stock at the end of the game to my name. But I wasn't mad about that. I was just internally, I was laughing just because I was sitting across the table from John, just the look on his face of, oh, I can do this god awful thing to you. And he's like, I don't want, that's mean. I'm like, no, that's exactly what you should be doing to me, because I was stupid enough to make that situation possible.
Yeah, and that's another way I've seen to be mean is another intriguing thing that with these games I find fairly fascinating is that not only can you be mean with companies you might say, but logistically on the board you can be mean with the way you lay your tracks and the way you position your you can block people off from getting money from their routes.
Right. Yeah, because in pretty much all of these games there's things called tokens, and when you put them down they take up a spot in a city. If there are no open token spots in a city, then in most of the games you can run to that city, but you can't run through that city. And that can be used, and it really depends how your groups play. Like when we first started playing here in Iowa, we were not that vicious with tokens. Like we were just kind of do this, because in most games laying tokens costs more money. You're like, oh, I can't do that. I got to have money for a train.
Yeah.
But
Rust is coming.
Yeah. But then I started playing online and with some other people in other states and stuff, and they're like, I'll token here, I'll token there. Oh God, you're running for like $20. Boy, that sucks to be you.
And it seems that some of, at least in 1846, the frequency of the tracks, you know, there's tiles with track, and there are a finite number of those things. And if to build a route, you gotta, sometimes you don't get the track you need to like complete the route you want. And in our particular game, we called it like the tile 64 problem, because that's the tile everyone wanted. And no matter what freaking route they constructed, it always came back to needing tile 64, which didn't exist anymore.
Yeah, in some of the games, like I said, depending on the game, that can be real restrictive or not really restrictive. Okay. Like, for example, when I first played 1830, everyone said how restrictive it was, and I never felt it really was. Well, it turns out, because I was playing the Mayfair Kid Gloves version. When we went to the Avalon
Glove version, that's awesome.
Yeah. No, when we went to the Avalon Hill version, we were all like, oh, because, you know, usually your tracks, there's like, you know, different tracks going into a city and different tracks going out of a city. And I played 1830 online on this website called Board 18, and they only have the Avalon Hill version on there. And so, like, I started my company. I'm like, okay, I'm going to use a curved city track to start off, because that'll, oh my God, there's no curve. No, curves. There's only straight city tracks. Oh God. Like, yeah. And then okay, this is what people are talking about. And some people really don't like that about 1830. And that's, some of those people prefer 89, because 30 is very restrictive in its roots. Very, very nasty. I played a game, I think it was 56 as well, that was really rough on that. Because I think in that one, it was like you could lay 2 tiles quickly or something like that. And I used the only 2 cities for myself that this other guy needed to really make his work. And so, like, I took the 2 tiles he absolutely needed before he even got to his company. And then he's like, okay, I'm going to put I hate you. It's like, he basically needed to do a real tight loop-de-loop, and he ended up having to, like come around. Took him like a whole extra set of ORs to get where he needed to be with it.
Oh, that's hilarious.
So those can be very nasty like that as well. Or even worse, in 1849, that game, it's another one that's about 4.5 hours, 5 if you're really being careful. It's got this huge track supply. Because when you get to like the green ones, because usually there's different levels of track. There's like yellow, which is your basic. Green, you build on top of yellow.
Yeah.
Brown. But if you look at the manifest for the green tiles, it's all like 1 tile of that type. And so you're just like, I really could use like either one of these 3. Oh, you need this one. I'm going to do that one. And then you're just out of luck. Like, there's nothing you can do. Like, it's
yeah. So it sounds like there's multiple ways to be mean, and I always, you know, that was kind of hard for me in my head, because I only played the one type, and I hear people talk about being mean. I'm like, how is it mean? And then I hear all this stuff. I'm like, oh my goodness, that can be vicious.
Yeah.
One of the things I wanted to hit upon was, I've always been curious exactly what a winsome is, because I've always heard about winsome this, winsome that. What is a winsome title usually entail, and what is it? How does it pertain to 18xx games?
Well, Winsome is this game company that I still can't figure out exactly why they exist. Okay. I guess is the way to put it. Just because it's weird. Like, anyway, the thing with Winsome Games is it's basically this company that produces really out there games. Like, it's kind of like one of those weird boutique things, right? So the way it ends up working is you have to kind of be on this email list, which you're automatically on if you've bought Winsome Games before. But if you're not on Winsome Games, you have to like be like at your computer the minute these emails shoot out. So you can be like, I want one. because there's only a certain number of these sets made, and what you end up doing is you pay about $150 up front, and you get that set of Winsome games, but you have no idea what's in it.
It's like a subscription?
Yeah, kind of.
Okay. Okay.
And generally, then these Winsome games come in like plastic blister packs, with like a paper map, which doesn't bother me. I've played war games too and whatnot, right?
Actually, Andy finds it endearing.
Well, I do have to be honest. I do like my paper mats, like for my war games, because then I can put the acrylic sheet on top of them.
That's what you end up having to do with these two.
My block games on it, they make a really satisfying clicking noise. Click, 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 click. So, it's a thing.
But what you also get then is typically in most like quote unquote professionally produced 18xx games, you get a mounted board. They're kind of paperish tiles usually and whatnot. But they have wooden tokens and all that with like sticker labels on them. When you get a Winsome set, it's like, and usually there's some form of graphic design, but in a Winsome set, you get your map. The map is pretty similar to most 18xx board maps. Like there's not a lot of difference there. However, the shares of stock are like pieces of like red, yellow, and green construction paper cut into squares with no graphic design. It's just like the name of the company, Share. And then instead of discs, you get wooden cubes in that color and no stickers for designation. It's just that. Generally, I haven't played a lot of these. Oh, and you don't even have all the components to play.
Yeah, that's the big thing I heard. Like,
you have to have 1830 components. In actuality, in actuality, you can get by with it because any of the components you actually need for these Winsome games are like on BGG. You just have to download them and print them out yourself and cut them up. But anyway, they have that. The thing that it's kind of neat about Winsome games is that they're willing to take a lot of risks with design. So they, because he's like, I'm making 100 sets this year and that's it. So he doesn't even care. Like, I'm going to sell all of these. Like, I don't have to worry about, being a Spiel de Jaris winner or something.
Yeah, they're already spoken for.
Exactly. And so, like, he can just take all these chances with weird games. Like, to pull out of 18xx for a minute, like, I have another one from Winsome called Union versus Central. That's 290 card decks. And it's like a train logistics game, which sounds ridiculous. 290 card decks, train logistics game with a healthy dose of take that capability. And oh, by the way, if you want to play the short game, 3 hours.
No, it's just short game? Okay.
Oh, yeah. If you want to play the full game, it's 12 hours of punching each other in the face.
That sounds like what's that big one that's set in Japan? 18CZ or
no. They have the
1889 is set in Japan.
Okay.
Yeah, that's one. The biggest ones I've run across in 18xx would be 18OE, which like covers all of Europe. There's also 18C to C, I think, which was a game the designer of 18OE was working on before 18OE. But that's kind of stalled out. But that basically takes place over like the entire United States. Like, the odds that you even have a table in your house that will fit these boards on it are low.
Slim to none. The people who do it already have like a model train on top of it. Yeah.
Oh, God, no, it's crazy. Like, when I've seen 18OE set up in a convention, because all conventions typically have those like cheap white plastic tables you buy, right? Mm-hmm. It takes 2 of those for the board.
Yeah.
Then another one to put all the shares down and the money.
Yeah, when I saw someone had this set up at GameStorm, it was like at least 3 tables that I saw, and it was half the room.
Oh, yeah. No,
and 4 people just looking miserable, just staring with a calculator. Like, are they having fun? Oh, they're really happy. I'm like, really? I got to check this out.
Well, yeah, no, like, as I always tell people, I'm like, here's the pose of a heavy gamer having a good time.
Yeah. just hunched over, look like they have a calculus book in front of them, just
we did that
over equations.
we played Food Chain Magnate in a restaurant. And like it was all 4 guys sitting at a table staring at it like, dang it. How?
Yeah, and then usually then this light goes off that the first move they made in that game cost them the game, and it's like 3 hours after they got into it. That's typically Food Chain or an 18xx game that I've seen.
No, like this legitimately. Like we'll talk in a minute, kind of about what I refer to the big boy ones, or not really big boys. It's just the ridiculously huge games, like 18OE. I did a full game of this once so far. I'd like to try it again sometime, but legitimately, this is a thing I said. I looked at another guy playing, and I'm like, you know, the sad part, it's taken me 16 hours to realize I lost this in the first 30 minutes.
30 minutes. Yeah, that's quite the refrain from experienced 18xx gamers, especially ones who know the system quite well. They'll know, like, they're like, you know what? I know exactly where this thing all flew off the rails, and it was when I made this move right here. The 4th move of the game I did cost me the game.
Well, and see, that's one of the things I find appealing about them, because yeah, in almost every case, you can look back and go, what was the mistake? Because they're all open information games. And they're non-random for the most part. And so you can look back and see, like, yeah, this was the bad move.
And usually someone will tell you what it was too. Like, yeah, you're right. Actually, it wasn't that move. It was the one before that.
Generally speaking, one good way you can tell if you're screwed or not, I found, is if you're reacting to the train rush rather than controlling the train rush, you're not in a good position.
Yeah, if you can... it's like with the war game. If you can dictate the pace of the game, you're on top of it, and you stand a really good shot. I mean, it's really hard for me to teach war games and get that instilled in people. And that was kind of an advantage going into 1846 for me personally, was that at least when I got into that second game, I was like, look, if I can control the pace of this game, I've got this thing under control. If I can get everyone reacting to what I'm doing, I'm in the driver's seat, and that's a huge advantage.
Yeah, absolutely. Like there was one I played once that it was 1870, which generally feels a little gentler than some games. But I was playing a game of this online with Trent, who's also on the good board of the ugly, and I was looking at all the trains and what I could do, and I'm like, if I buy the next train type, like I'll have to withhold twice to do this, which is not something you would normally want to do. But I'm like, if I withhold twice and buy this next train type, it will literally cause a cascade of rusting that will bankrupt Trent.
Oh my God.
Yeah, let's do that.
Do it.
Oh, I did, and it won me the game, because I think Trent was either in the lead or like really close to the first player, and like that move took him completely out of the game and got me first place.
Dang, that's like I said, that's what I always find impressive with these particular style of games, is just the how you can just dictating the flow of the game is huge.
Right.
It's pretty awesome.
And that's the other thing I think to know about a lot of them is even the quote unquote nicer games, they're going to have a healthy dose of player interaction. These are not the type of games you play if you want to be if you want to have your plan that you're set up, that you know is going to be efficient and nobody can mess with you. These are not the kind of games you want to play. Because you can have all the best plans in the world till someone drops a token in the middle of your route.
Yeah, it just or it gives you a company you don't want.
Exactly. Yeah, and there's things like that in all of them. I mean, in 18OE, for example, is a very big one, and for the most part, it feels very gentle in the aspect of, there's not a whole lot of company dumping or anything like that. But the tokening in that game is brutal. Because almost every city in that game has room for one token. And so I always tell people in that one, I'm like, token often, or your route is done. But all of them have some level of meanness to them like that, where you have an ability to dictate what another person has to do or has to respond to. And I guess that's another thing to point out that's good is every 18xx, people in the community generally call them the MacGuffins. How is this game different than 1830? And every game kind of has those little eccentricities to them compared to 1830. And generally, that's what most people want to look at.
Yeah, well, that doesn't say that's what that seems to be a great appeal to people who play these games. I mean, me personally, that's what I look forward to, like, for example, in a coin game, right? I'm always looking for, okay, how does this particular iteration differentiate itself from the original, which was Andy and Abyss? And when you talk to people who, I'm glad you brought MacGuffin, because the first I think was Anthony Fryer talk about it. Yeah. They refer to them as MacGuffins. I'm like, what, a plot device that drives the movie that you don't need? What are we talking about here? But no, he described it, and that adds, you know, variability to the system, so you can play it in multiple different ways. It can be as short as you want, as long as you want. And I while I'm not as deep into that rabbit hole as some people, I'm definitely deep in the rabbit hole in another way, and I can appreciate that. I really can. I mean, you got people who play Magic cards for much the same way. Essentially, they just want to. It's the same system. It's just different ways of playing it.
Right.
So,
yep, go ahead.
I guess, Andy, my question would be, like, kind of going off what you guys have been saying here with, like, 1830 being the sort of benchmark that so many other games are measured up to, and then you call it the differences MacGuffins, like, you know, to what degree, like, what types of things are these games offering? Like, are they developing on aspects found in 1830? Are they trying to streamline 1830 and make it, like, more palatable towards newer players? Are they trying to make 1830 push in a different direction? And do you think they're even starting with 1830 at the core? And to what degree is, like, you know, are these games being, like, reinvented? You know, like, how often are they reinventing the wheel and putting it on a set of rails?
Rails, that's nice. I like that, Joe.
So far, everyone I've played has felt fairly somewhat different. I mean, yeah, there's ones that feel more like 1830 and more different. They run a very big gamut. Like, you have 1889, which is almost 1830, right? And then you've got, like, the new one GMT's kicking out, 1862.
Oh, I've heard crazy things about that one. The Relay Mania?
What that game really feels like is, like, let's take every misconception anyone has ever made about a rule in an 18xx game and make those the rules. So, like, yeah, I was very surprised that they even went with that with their second game, because you got 46, which is, you know, whether you think it's the best intro game or not, is more or less an intro game of some variety. And you've got 1862, which I would not recommend to new people, or even, you know, if people like, I got a 1846, should I try 62? I'd be like, I might wait, because, like, there's just it's insane. Like, there's just so many different things. But you've got some that are a little closer, but might tweak. So for me, like, I kind of have this category I call sort of next step 18xx games. So you've tried 89, you've tried 46, you're looking for something a little bit more crunchy. Yeah, going to a 62 is quite elite. Now, if you're a gamer like me, you would be like, no problem then. Yeah, that'll be fine. Because I'm insane. But the average person, I think, generally wants to build up because they want to feel like, you know, most people, they don't want to feel like they're dumb. They want to feel like they know vaguely what's going on in the game. And if you jump from 89 to 62, there's good odds you'll just be like, I have no idea. Which I'm fine with. I'm just like, I have no idea. Okay, let's try this then. But most people, I think, I've met kind of like to build up to something like that. And so once you're kind of got your feet wet in like an 89, I think if you've done 46, your next step from that should be to do more of a 89 or a 1830. So you'll see what the main system is like. Because 46, the way some people describe 46 is it's a great 18xx for people who are going to play 1846. because as it does kind of move you in a little bit gently, but it doesn't really run like most of the games run. It runs pretty differently. So I think a next good steps to go to a 30 or an 89 at that point. Or there's one that actually is being play tested, I think, by All Aboard Games. I've heard some buzz about it called 18 Chesapeake, and it's supposed to be coming out in the near future. But I've heard a lot of people say that this is the intro game, like dump 89, dump 46. This is the one you use to teach new people. And I've heard a lot of people saying that. I absolutely know nothing about it, but.
So Andy, for a next step, so you're essentially taking us on a little bit of a walk through a candy store, because
there's train store.
Yeah, they're like sweet tart shaped train, or train shaped sweet tarts. So
here we go.
But each of these different things, the reason I use that metaphorically is because different gamers within 18xx genre are looking for different things, and so not everybody's gonna come to a consensus that this is the game that's the best for this. Now, to what degree, how do you, after you've made this first step into 18xx games, what type of an approach should you take towards, first of all, seeking out what level of commitment are you going to need to, are you going to have to choose from? Are you going to have to make your own games? If you want to purchase games that are pre-made, what can you do? I mean, what are your options in terms of where you can play them? I hear you talk about a lot of different game systems, Andy, but I do not hear you mention designers that frequently. Is there different 18xx designers that have different, sort of things they tend to focus on? There's a couple that I feel like I maybe know them because they cross over into other genres, that I recognize them as 18xx designers. So how is 18xx organized? Is I guess the overarching question.
Right. And so, like I said, there's kind of the two branches. There's the operational and there's kind of the financial shenanigans path. I think what you should do is, once you've played 46 and then say a 89 or an 1830, right? You need to take a look at these games and think, what is it that I like about them? Do I like screwing with people on the stock market? Do I like more of this run good company style? For me, I go either way. I enjoy both. But there's some people that definitely have a preference. And so if you find that you really like building the routes and you like being efficient and you like more the map part of the game as far as the interaction, then you want to go find other run good companies games. Those would be things like 1861, 1867 would fall in that category, those kinds of things. If you like sort of the stock market nastiness, if you like the ability to dump companies on people to, really jab, the metaphorical knife in, that's where you might start looking at things like an 18 Mexico, an 1856. Now, the way you're generally going to get a hold of these kind of games is this. 18xx is growing. Definitely. More people are playing these than used to play them, right?
Well, that's absolutely true, because I think the last I checked, the P500 for 1862 was close to 850 people.
Oh, yeah. And there's definitely a market there. However, it's still kind of an untapped market. GMT is kind of the first big publisher other than Mayfair who's kind of gotten into it. And Mayfair is very sporadic about when and if they'll release them. But GMT is kind of the new one on the block that is taking some interest in those styles. So if you want to get 18X games, there's kind of a few routes you can go. You can either buy the ones from Mayfair, but they tend to be out of print fairly quickly because, there's only kind of so many copies of an 1830 you can sell before you're going to be sitting on a lot of them in a warehouse, or so their thinking goes. So they go out of prep pretty fast. They can be hard to find. The other options you have are now your GMTP 500 model. You can do them, although that's still kind of getting off the ground, so there's not a lot of choices there. The main way I have found right now you're going to get into the variety of 18xx games is you're either going to print and play them, which is one method I use. Most people are not going to be willing to put that level of work into it. So there's primarily, I guess, technically 3 sources, but in reality 2 sources. Because the way you used to get these games was you would go to a website called Deep Thought Games. Deep Thought, forgive me, I don't know the person who ran Deep Thought Games off the top of my head. But you would basically say, I'm interested in purchasing this game from your list. You would get that on a queue. Once your game was produced, you would get charged and the game would be shipped to you. Now, when I say produced, keep in mind by produced, we mean this person was making them in their house. Like they basically were making very nice print and plays, right? But that's how you got them, is you got on the Deep Thought Games queue. However, I never really did because I got into this later in the game, right? If you want to go to Deep Thought Games now, you can get on the queue. You'll be number 600 something, and it hasn't moved in 4 years, but you could.
They don't even make games anymore then, really?
He really doesn't. He's more like he tries to kind of collate the designers and find them. And then really what he started doing, because like I said, this was kind of a labor of love. Like this guy was not making money making 18xx games, right? And so what he did was he ended up kind of selling the rights to a couple other companies. One of them is called Golden Spike Games. So it's a similar model. You order, you buy, you essentially get what is a very nice print and play. There's now all aboard games. Same deal though. You're getting basically very nice print and plays. Very functional. But if you're a component snob, you're probably going to be pissed at the amount of money you're paying for this.
Well, yeah, that was funny because I remember when I got I remember one of the things I read because I got my 1846. I'm like, oh, these components are great, and people were actually complaining that the hexagonal tiles were too thick. I'm like, man, these are nice GMT quality thick. These are wow. What have you guys been dealing with for the past few years?
Right. Well, I think the thing to remember is, as gamers, and legitimately not saying this in a mean-spirited way, there's probably a fair amount of us that are on the spectrum, the percentage-wise for autism. Me too. So, and then I kind of feel once you get into the 18xx community, that percentage goes up.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because weirdly enough, there's actual correlation to this. I was reading that for some reason, like, trains are very appealing to autistic people. I don't know why, but like it's a legitimate research thing. So anyway, yeah, you get some really weird things going on. Like there's some deep recesses of the AOL groups and stuff that I have not dived into because it frightens me.
And just mentioning that, because I remember when I was playing 1847, like, yeah, I kind of like using the paper money, and I thought I was going to get hammered. I was like, you use paper, that's ridiculous. You just throw that stuff away. I'm like, but it's nice, and I can paper clip it and put it on my company. You don't do okay. Sure.
Well, in reality, like the paper money thing, while it's functional, like it's not as much snobbery as you would think, because when we were first kind of really trying to explore this, like Joe even bought a copy of Poseidon, which is kind of like an 18xx in ancient Greek times. It's basically tricking you into playing a train game. But it came with paper money, and at the time that's all we had, so we used it. And then like legitimately we could count that the game took half an hour to an hour longer because we were fiddling with paper money.
Yeah.
Like legitimately it increased the game time. So for poker chips, which is usually what most people, you know, that are in that genre, like I have poker chips. Those tend to be what's used because when you really start kind of getting into these and getting competitive at these, like you really want to know at a glance which companies have how much money and where everybody's at. And you really don't want to have to look at across the table and go, can you count how much your company has again?
Can you display your paper money right quick so I can see that?
Exactly. It's so the poker chips thing is totally like because we need to, you know, function here. We need to get this moving along a lot quicker. And poker chips legitimately do that. Now, if you really want to get further into the deep nerdery, there's people that use computer programs and like spreadsheets and like graphs. Yeah, I do that when I play online, but
I've seen laptops being used as supplement. I've seen briefcases of poker chips being used. Oh, yeah. Like I said earlier, this is, if you decide to go down this rabbit hole, this is a lifestyle game you can really dedicate probably the rest of your life to learning and playing.
Right. And then, well, and the nice thing about it really, and the thing that I think I have found to be so appealing about it is that once you've played a few titles, I would say when you're getting into the 10 to 20 plays of either one or various titles, you know, right. So going back to Euro games, right. And not to just diss Euro games, because I still play those a lot too. But when you learn a heavy Euro game and you go to learn a second heavy Euro game, like it's they can be so fundamentally different that nothing, you know, passes between the two knowledge wise. Whereas if you understand the basic system of 18xx, you just sit down and go, okay, what's different? Boom, 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 boom. Okay, let's go. And I'm not going to say you'll start out being good at the specific title, but you can start out being somewhat competent at the specific title.
Well, you'll be familiar enough with the structure of the game that you just got to figure out what doors you need to open because they'll be maybe in different locations.
Yeah. Oh, and the $20 poker. Yeah, you really want to see it go into worse than paper money. TC, get on the forum and go, should I use $25 or $20 poker chips?
It just like explode.
Oh God, it'll go forever. It's bad enough. Like I ended up getting like poker chip carriers like for Father's Day, so I just threw out all my 25s and bought a bunch more 10s just to avoid it.
There's something to be said, really, of people who play the same type of game and you can just get open a new version of it and just be immediately playing and competitive and up to speed. Again, I can't relate with anything, but I definitely can do it with coin. We're like, okay, we know the basic structure. We just got to figure out how these things function differently. And then within 20, 30 to 45 minutes, depending on how radically different it is, we got now. We are by no means going to be any good at that. Right. Don't even think that, but we have the structure and that takes a lot off, especially if you're always teaching games or, you know, it's like, okay, guys, like we all know how this is. Let's just go over the differences and just hit the ground running and we'll just all fall on our face at the same time and have fun.
Yeah. And that's kind of the appeal of it. Once you got some of those introductory titles under your belt, and before I kind of move on, I guess I do want to finish up with like, how do you acquire them? Right.
Oh, sorry. Go on.
So talking about Golden Spike and all aboard games, another thing, and I kind of started with this that bothers some new people is kind of what you pay for what you get, because people are often thinking of sort of the Fantasy Flight, you know, American style or the Euro games with a lot of wood. People are generally, especially I would say now, used to getting very quote unquote nice components, right? Nice heavy wood bits, plastic minis. But this is like an economy of scale thing, right? Like you're going to sell 1,000, 2,000 copies. 18xx are usually print on demand. And so you're going to pay a lot of money to get a board that, you know, if you're reviewing an 18xx game, you're like, what's the artwork like? There's artwork.
It's like there's numbers for where you go from place to place, and maybe a name of the town.
Right, and legitimately, that's also a functional thing because the games are complicated enough that the artwork, graphic design, and everything is designed to be functional, not form. Because you want to be able to look across the table and go, okay, this is where we stand. This is what I need to do. Like I've seen actually recently where a guy did redid the 18 Mexico, right? Boards and shares and everything to go with like Mexican style art and stuff. And I looked at it. Don't get me wrong. It's a beautiful looking game, but it looked like Pax Porfiriana and an 18XX had a baby. And I looked at it, I'm like, that's beautiful. And you just took all the functionality away because like literally I can't at a glance tell what's going on now. So the artwork or lack thereof is purposefully done. But that's the thing you got to know. You're going to get some laminated chits. You're going to get this. You're going to get that. And you're going to pay about $100 for the privilege. Like, it's not cheap. If you want to pay less, then you have to get a Mayfair or a GMT. Then you're shelling out about as much as you would for a Euro game, right?
Yeah.
But if you're wanting a lot of variability, then you're going to have to be shelling out. You know, you're going to have to go to the post office to get money orders because you're getting winsomes and things like that. So it's this really oddball corner. And it's really weird because, like, there's a lot of train gamers that do not want to come into the 21st century. Like that, you know, there's a moderating program a lot of them use for their games instead of poker chips. And I'm like, oh, that sounds cool. That might be a way to do it. Does it come in something besides DOS? No, you just got to run it on an old computer. And I'm like, what?
Let me bring out my TRS-80.
Like, one of the main ways of communication is still a Yahoo group. I'm like, Yahoo still exists. Yeah. I mean, so yeah, it's just kind of this weird niche thing, and you got to kind of like navigate your way through it, right?
Yeah, but that being said, I mean, there is definitely an uptick in 18XX. And I'm thinking that if you're patient enough, and you know, I think these will become slowly but surely. These games are becoming more available.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. And whoever is going to be on that wave, I think, stands to. I'm not going to say they're going to make a huge amount of money off 18XX,
no, but
it's definitely an untapped market, right? Mm-hmm. So anyway, I guess a direction to go with this is like, so you've tried one, what should you look at next? Because I see this form question all the time. Like, I've tried this, where should I go? And I really think that the way I see some people answer this, the way I answered this is, what did you like about the last one you played, right? Because if I were to recommend some, if you like running companies, then you probably want to go with like 61 or 67, because those start introducing the concept of mergers. So mergers are a thing that were not in 1830, right? And generally mergers are like you join two companies together, or you start out with a different class of company called a minor company, and they you know, merge to become bigger companies. And that tends to be a very common mechanism in a lot of the you know, higher level operational games, is they add in mergers, and it's like, how do you time that merger?
Yeah.
And so that's kind of a good next step. Like I said, if you like you know, like I saw someone post this before where they're like, oh, I've done 1830 and I've done 46. I really love the financial stabbing in 1830. I hear 1817 does that. I'm like, do not go there yet. No, like I have not done that yet, but there's a lot of people that have played 1817 that they're like, I will never play another 18XX game but this now.
Wow.
But it's insane. Like, there's just so many different ways, and it's like the deep end of the deep end. And so that's totally not where you should be going next. Like, you're in over your head there. Or like, you know, 1841 is one I want to play someday, that just sounds almost too insane even for me. because your companies can start companies. So you can literally end up in a situation where like you have a company that started a company that started another company, and that company had to force buy a train, which then bankrupted this company, which then bankrupted that company, which bankrupted you.
Sounds like you're almost describing Inception.
Yeah,
it's
like
a dream within a dream within a dream within a dream.
And it's another one that you have to play a lot to get your brain around. Like, what was it? I think when Tony was still doing Heavy Cardboard, they talked about that they had met up with a guy at some train convention that had it, and they played a game with him. And he's like, look, I'm going to start with these two companies because this is the worst position to start in this game. And he still destroyed both of them.
Just because he's played it so much.
Yeah. Right. And there's just so many weird things to learn about the game, right? Because it falls into what I call, for lack of a better term, advanced. And what I don't mean by that is that you're not capable of playing it. It just means that there's so many rules to it that keeping track of everything is very difficult. And so that would be like your 1817, your 41, and your 18OE. They're advanced in their own way, but there are a lot of rules. Like I kind of started out with 18OE, but like I said, I'm the one who went from Catan to Mage Knight. So I don't recommend that path for the average person.
Yeah. But and I would also just to get here and say, it's like, I've been playing 1846. I've been perfectly happy with it, and I'm not ready to move on. I want to play that thing like 20 more times. There is so much to explore in that game. Just there. So I always try that with people. Oh, we'll try the next thing. It's like, well, I kind of recommend exploring what you got, because I mean, well, I love 46, and I just want to play it more and more. And people are like, you want to move on? I'm like, no.
Well, that's right. And there's like all kinds of insanity you can do. Like I played 46 several times before I realized, like in some of these games, right, your companies can fail. Like they just die.
It's like wither.
And the thing when you look at 18XX games, when you look at any mechanism in an 18XX game, there's one of two things that mechanism is. It's a tool or it's a weapon. And a thing I saw actually Tony did, and then I did it in a game of 46, was like I started the B&O, right? Mm-hmm. And then I immediately bought like 3 2 trains, like as many 2 trains as I could. And then I set up the situation such that I bought like all of these 2 trains with the B&O. Then I sold off shares, started another company, bought the trains from the B&O for like $1 each, and then let the B&O die.
Yeah, okay, I can see that.
And so I basically loaded up a different company with a bunch of 2 trains that cost $3, and it maybe cost me $20, and then you just ransack the game from there. But even at that point, someone could have stopped me because I just been, oh, you only own 2 shares of that. Okay, bye. Now you lost it.
Yeah, it's like you just buy them out. Is it? Yeah, it's all about leverage and kind of sneaking under the radar. That's some of that stuff.
Yeah, right. Actually, and like I said, like mergers even can be a tool or a weapon. In most games, they tend to be a tool, like how to increase your value. But if you play 18 Ireland, it's a weapon. Uh-huh. Because what happens in 18 Ireland, generally when you merge the 2 companies together, there's some mechanism of some kind that determines the new share price, right? Well, 18 Ireland has what they call a 2-dimensional stock market, which means your tokens can move up and down and side to side. Well, in 18 Ireland, what they do is they move until they link, right? Mm-hmm. So you can do something where, let's say, Joe, I'm using example because he's here.
Hey, Joe.
Hey, Joe. Hey, I'm still here, guys.
Okay.
And just because I imagine if Joe was playing the game and this happened to him, like he would flip the table and be done with all 18XX games forever. But you can start a company. You can start a company in 18 Ireland where you're running it great. It's got like this super high share value, right? But you're on the, like, say, right side of the stock. And then I start this crappy little miner that's at the bottom of the chart. And then I come and find your company, link them up. Oh, look, I have more shares than you. Okay, I vote we merge. Now all of my shares increase in value like mad while yours plummet. And so,
yay! Thanks so much for doing that, Andy. That's actually what a great move. Yeah. Like you got me. You caught me with my pants down.
And I gotta sit here for 4 more hours and lose. Thank you, Andy.
Well, to be fair, 18 Ireland was insane anyway, because I played it for the first time at HeavyCon, and I'm pretty sure I lost and then re-owned the same company about 3 times and still won the game.
Wow.
At the end of it, I ended up winning. I'm like, I won? How did I win?
What a mess.
What a mess.
Well, it's insane. But 18 Ireland, and this is the thing, is some games in 18XX even, like, the money doesn't even come the same. Because in 18 Ireland, oh, God, it's a slog. Like, because Ireland was really poor, right? So the entire game has a $4,000 bank, which is about half to third of the normal bank of any other title. And so you're making just crappy payouts the whole game because Ireland was poor. However, if you play another one I like called 18 CLE, it's all about the Great Depression, right? So when you hit like the roaring 20s, i.e. the green phase, you're making money like hand over fist. Like it's rolling in and you're almost scared to withhold because you're like, I'm making so much money. But then the depression hits and everything goes to crap. And if you got too greedy and paid out too much, your company will never survive. And so there's all kinds of things like that. And there's just it's just basically like there's an almost infinite variety of possible games out there you could choose from. Or 1849, as it was mentioned. 1849 is still a game I have not figured out, man. Like it is brutal. It doesn't seem like it should be brutal, but it's brutal. Because it also has like a lot of 18xx's too don't have player elimination, or if player elimination is in it, it triggers the end of the game, right?
Yeah.
49 doesn't. It has player elimination. Your company got down to, I got a share I could sell of yours. How bad do you want to go watch TV?
Because you're about to watch a 3-hour movie.
Yeah, it's exactly, you can do that. But that's the thing, that could be both kind of good and bad, right? Because the other thing is some of them that are quote unquote nicer don't have that player elimination aspect, but they still are probably going to have a player irrelevancy aspect to them. You're going to get a person in a position that has no prayer of winning that game. It doesn't matter what they do, they're not going to eke out first place. So then, they either get angry because now they're stuck here for another 2 to 3 hours knowing they can't win, or they got to do something like, okay, well, I know generally, because I put myself in those situations, and what I do is go, I know I can't win, but how can I not win the best? Like, how can I like close this gap as quickly as possible, just to, because that'll give you an idea of what to do in later games, right? But some people won't like that. Like, they'll just get to the point that like, I know I can't win. Why should I sit here?
And that's something you gotta know going into it. I mean,
right.
But like you said, it's worthwhile to at least get to learn what this game's doing and how to avoid the pit trap the next time you play. And I imagine it's the people you're playing with too.
Yeah, a lot of it. Like, I'm the kind of gamer who's like, I will do something horrible to someone, but I'll be the same. I'll be laughing just as hard when someone does something horrible to me as well. I'm like, yes, good move, sir.
I'm going to go here and weep into my drink.
Yeah. Well, and with my dry sense of humor, I'll be doing something like, all right, pay out $20, withhold, CEO jumps out 5th story window.
CEO,
just like, I'm done. But and it's funny too, because like these games, are very historical. Like almost every game takes place in a certain place in the world at a certain time.
Yeah, and they usually represent actual train companies that existed, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, usually there's like several that did exist, but then they have to kind of like throw in a fictitious one or two just to round it out, right?
Count, yeah.
Or like generally when they're designing them, from what I hear, is you start with an actual map of the region, but you might have to move a town here or there just to, game balance wise.
Yeah.
And they are very historical, which is funny because I run across so many 18xx players that are like train history nerds as well. Like they know the airlines. For me, it's so like, you're not into train history. I'm like, no, I like destroying my brain with numbers. Like that's what I enjoy out of it. As Joe says, I'm a masochist. But
he's the masochist.
But yeah, I've run across even people who play just. It's not necessarily limited to 18x. I've run across people who played train games in general, like a Ticket to Ride and other train games. I can't think of. Anyway, but they like, you ask them about locomotives and like, oh yeah, this steam locomotive ran from blah 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 blah. Yeah. And it's like, it's legitimately interesting to listen to these people talk because they know their stuff, and it is a very fascinating time of history, right? For many different reasons.
Yeah, and like one of the most fun experiences I ever had playing an 18xx game was actually at Gen Con. I played 18CLE with the designer of the game. And so as we were playing the game, he was pointing out little history tidbits about the map and the companies and what they did and why they worked this way. Like that was just, for me, fascinating. Like there would have been some gamers who are like, shut up, I'm making my move. But I find that interesting. Like that kind of thing enhances a game for me, right? Like I learned something from it. In most 18xx games, though, in general, you're going to have like a half a page to a page of like historical notes in the back. It's like, here's what inspired me to do what I did and why. And so that's kind of neat as well. Like you've got that aspect of history going on with it.
Oh yeah, Joe, help us. I'm kind of running out of questions. Kind of running dry here.
Okay, so Andy, like next step, what games? Which ones?
My advice for next steps is if you're going to go the financial route, I think you go with an 18 Mexico. In 1856, if you can get a hold of it. That's one of those kind of out of print Mayfair ones, so they're kind of hard to find. I think that's a good one. If you're going to go run good companies, I think your next step will be an 1861, which they're actually a free print and play of that, or you can buy it from All Aboard Games if you just want someone else to do the work for you. 1867, which is based on 61, I think is a good one. Those are good examples of run good companies games. They typically have mergers. A lot of these run good companies games at some point will have something called a national railway that will either absorb struggling companies or this, that, or the other thing. And those are located in those games. So I think you go there. For what I put down for moderates, so like if you're you think you've gotten enough out of these sort of next steps, 56 is one where I could go either way as a next step or a moderate. That, I don't know, I still struggle with that game as well. 18CZ, which just came out, so there's still copies of that floating around. The thing that actually 18CZ that makes it a nice buy too is I run across this question of like, well, I really only play 2-player games. Is there an 18xx for that? I'm like, no, most of them do not play well at 2. CZ is the exception. I played the 2-player variant for that, and oh my god, we screwed up one rule when we did it, or like the little AI player would have rusted all our trains out from under us. Like, it's nasty. But anyway, the moderates, I kind of put 1830 at the moderate level. I know there's a lot of people that are like, no, 1830 was the first, so that should be your introduction. But 1830 is mean. And like, it's really easy to put yourself kind of in bad spots. And so I kind of consider that more of a moderate game. 1860, which I'm kind of wondering if GMT is gonna kick that one out, because it's the same designer as 62.
Huh.
And I, for the life of me, don't remember his name. But the hallmark of his games is they're just insane. There's like he seems to want to stretch the system to its almost breaking point with new weird ways of handling things. So there's those, and I think those work very well. Generally, what I think of is, I guess, the advanced games, or these are the games, not in the sense that they're advanced in the difficulty curve, but advanced in the sense that, Mike Hutton. Thanks, Jason. That's true. The advanced games just tend to have a lot of rules to them, and they're not as intuitive as some of the other train games. That's going to be like your 1817, your 41. I kind of put 62 in the advanced category just because there's 50 billion ways of accomplishing something. 18OE, kind of 1822. I know 1822's gained a lot of popularity after it won the Golden Elephant Award, but it's still kind of an advanced game. Like there's, because 22 is all about synergies, right? So it's getting the best privates, which will work with these miners, which will work with this company. And until you've played a few different titles, like knowing how to link all those together is going to be a little bit tricky. But if you know what you're doing, like it's an incredibly fun game. I think my personal recommendation as a next step game, like the absolute best one, is 18 Mexico. Like I love that game on its own for its own merits. And it's a great next step game because it has just a little bit of merger, a little bit of national railway, and still has a good stock nastiness to it. Like you can still dump companies on people. It's got just an insane train rush, which can teach you how to deal with that, because what they do in 18 Mexico, right? Up until the first 4 train, you can only buy 1 train per OR. In most of these games, you can buy as many dang trains as you want and have money for it. Up to a certain limit, your company can have, 3, 4, whatever. 18 Mexico, you can only buy 1 train until the 4 train is bought, and you buy as many as you want. So the train rush in 18 Mexico tends to be like, nice, okay, it's all good, boom, boom, and then like everyone's rusting out, like what the hell just happened?
Everybody gets the trains rust, and then it all goes back.
Right, like because you buy a 4 train in like an 1830, you can expect to run that 4 train a few times, right? You buy a 4 train, like if you're in the situation where you buy a 4 train in 18 Mexico, you almost regret that because you're dang lucky if it runs once.
Is you've triggered something that's gonna
Right. Yeah. 18 Mexico, like it's kind of about positioning yourself in the train rush. You're kind of hoping when the train rush is over, you have a permanent train on your company. Because like I've seen in a lot of games I've played, the 4 trains run like once before they're
toast.
Dead.
Rust toast.
Yeah, and so I like that one because it still has some teeth to it, but it has that kind of smidgen of other mechanisms. Plus the map is like just evil. Like there's just terrain cost all over the place. However, you get these cool little mail contracts, like your home city just keeps paying your treasury. So I think of it as kind of a really good next step game. Like, and it's still, time-wise, it's hard for me to judge time because I think my normal group here in Ames, we play real fast. Like, because we're not too worried about being super competitive early on. Because most people are like, oh man, the first play of this is going to take you 6 hours. Then we're like at 4.5 and we're done.
Yeah, I hear you. I know. I just said, like, you finished that coin game in how long? Oh, we did about 3 hours. Really? It took us like 6 to 7. I'm like, oh, really? Oh, we messed it all up and got finished with it real quick.
Yeah. So I don't know, but I would say like a Mexico reasonable play time would be 4.5, 5 hours on the outside. So it's just starting to get to some of the bigger lengths, but it's not bad. so that's kind of, I think, my favorite next step game to recommend is that one. It's just really good.
It's not going to be 18-OE.
Yeah, it's not going to be.
Something you can prop your door open with for a while.
Here's a good example of OE. I could have finished a game of 18 Mexico in the time it took me to get 18 OE ready to play out of it.
That's a heavy lift.
The amount of sorting and stickering it took, I could have done a game of 18 Mexico in that time.
Is there anything else you want to ask Joe?
I really think that, you know, we've talked about
I think we've done a good job with this.
Different 18xx games, a lot of, you know, like the community itself is something that you kind of need to, you know, that we've talked about how there's different elements that you will maybe cling towards more as an 18xx gamer, and there are certain things that you're going to be, you know, that are kind of expected just for playability. You know, there's certain like steps that you might take, you know, where buying like a set of mini poker chips or even regular size poker chips, you wouldn't think of that as being like something that's necessary in any other part of the hobby that I'm aware of. But like it's kind of like, you know, if you're going to do like your collectible card games or living card games, you need like binders, you know, for your own organization and stuff. And I think that's kind of what, yeah, yeah, you know, things to like safeguard your game and stuff. And I mean, the thing is, you know, Andy, what's really come across is that you've really, you know, fallen for this hook, line, and sinker. And I think that your passion is really, really observable. And but also like you're making it accessible to people who are maybe taking that first next step.
Oh yeah, I love teaching people the system. And I think the other thing to maybe address with that as well is there is kind of like, I think, a stereotype reputation that most people have of a train gamer. Right? Because I had that initially. That's like, these are not going to be approachable people. And while there are some people like that, I'm not going to lie. They tend to hang out at some of the booths at Gen Con. No, I'm kidding. Yeah. But there are people like that because, like I said, for whatever reason, like the more oddballs go to this part of the hobby. So there are some that are kind of standoffish. I would say, though, there's a lot more of them that, you know, are weird, but not as weird as me, but still kind of open and friendly. Like they legitimately want to teach people new things and do that. But they're not going to be nice about it in the game. Like even Tony Fryer, like he's a wonderful guy to meet, talk to, play games with. But yeah, it could be your first game and he's going to be like, and this thing here is called a company dump.
And I'm giving it to you.
This is something you should watch out for in your next game.
Well, that generally can be said with just about any type. I mean, there's people who play Magic who there's people who you want to play, and there's people who are like, oh no. I mean, with even people who role play. I mean, they're all there. It's just not specific to 18xx. I can guarantee you.
Right, and I think it's like, you know, maybe war gamers have like the same stereotype many gamers have for them.
The stereotype for war gamers is I gotta have like this big gray beard and sit in a corner and just like, come over here, young whippersnapper. I'm gonna show you how to play a real game, right?
It's like, oh, what was it? I saw somebody.
Give me 20 years and I'll be there.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's kind of like I saw somebody, it might have been Edward in Heavy Cardboard, took a picture of somebody at WBC playing. I don't know if it was World in Flames, but it was like one of these monster war games. And it was like, you know, yeah, two extremely old guys.
Yeah, and they have like the light with the magnifying glass overhead and a tweezer
to look at the chits.
Yeah.
It's like some poorly lit, darkened corner of the area.
And they're there like all day and all night. Yeah. Yeah.
You see one of them like making moves and the other one's like reading a novel.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think you get similar stereotypes in the train gamers, but legitimately in this part of the hobby, I've met a lot more really friendly, fun people to play with than I have bad ones. Like I said, most people really want to spread it. spread the love, spread this, get to playing, whatnot. Just please, dear God, try to find a group that doesn't AP their train games.
Oh yeah, you'd be there for a very long time.
Yeah, if I remember right, that was like Joe's first experience, and it turned him off bad.
It did. I've still played like probably a dozen. I think I've maybe played more than a dozen games of 18xx, and I'm still open to playing them. I think I've got like 3 or 4 games of 1846, about as many games of 1889. An odd game here and there that was like I was trying something new. 1849 is one that was brought up, which is kind of an interesting game. It's what's kind of interesting about it though, Andy, is I would say that to a certain degree, when people get involved in 18xx games, they almost start to sort of develop a hardness, like they harden a bit towards other elements of the hobby, specifically like more popular elements of the hobby. Where like I feel like 18xxers that are really intense 18xxers are going to, largely be composed of folks that aren't even, they're not looking for any other new games that are coming out. They're like if you look at 18xx games on Board Game Geek, I think that the amount of ratings and just the amount of, like reviews that you'll see for an 18xx game is going to be significantly lower. And I still think there's tons of folks that are participating in this that are just not sharing their, they see that Board Game Geek is just not, like it's not providing them useful information, like the ratings and reviews and stuff. So
it's kind of a different beast in a way than a lot of the more popular games.
Because you look at like one of these 18xx games that you've brought up, and it's got a very low amount of reviews. Sometimes it'll have a really low user rating compared to what you would think to be expected. But it's like it's so much of it, I think, is that folks that have not played 18xx games that are trying it out for the first time, it's like that sort of user review. That the issue with user reviews is that 9 out of 10 times it's somebody who's got some, something they're upset about that's actually leaving a review.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that's kind of the thing to know about is it just kind of is like it's a niche within a niche kind of thing. And it's definitely not for everybody. And I think they do have a tendency for a lot of people to become, the quote unquote lifestyle game. And I think they do that because there's always, I guess not always, but more times than not, a very depth to the gameplay that exists in an 18xx game that doesn't necessarily exist in other games, right? Like when I show up to play an 18xx game, it very much is, my decision space against your decision space. We're not both sitting here being good company, but essentially playing our own game. So that I think is something I've come to appreciate in them. And so it often seems to me that there's a lot of other games that just kind of feel shallow to me anymore, that it's like, this doesn't have the richness that I come out of the 18xx experience with. That doesn't mean they're necessarily bad games, but I think they can very easily become a lifestyle game. Quite frankly, like personally, I don't have any desire to really make it a lifestyle game right now, but I could see where if that happened, I wouldn't have a problem with it. So like, there's a lot of people I love playing games with in our local game group, and I really have no desire to give that up. So we play the occasional XX game, but we tend to play more Euros and other things like that. But I could see a situation where if I moved away from everyone here, which I'm not planning on doing, but if I did,
you say with boxes behind you, okay?
Right. Yeah, that was out of the classroom, man. No, but if I were to say move to Kansas City, where there's a very thriving 18xx community, right? I could see joining that community and playing nothing but 18xx games and feel very fulfilled in my gaming about that, right? So it's kind of like chess. Like there's a lot of people that play chess and nothing else.
Yep.
Because chess gives them a very deep, rich experience, right? War games can be the same way. So I don't know if it's so much that 18xx does that, but I think it might have something to do with like when you get into those weird corridors of the gaming community, to use a metaphor, where you kind of find the niche within the niche and you're like, this is cool because I know it's cool and not a lot of people do, or something like that. It's just easy to get into those situations, especially if it's something you find out you really enjoy. Like, you know, there's a lot of people that play nothing but historical war games because they love the history aspect of it and whatnot.
Yeah. Yeah, I wonder who those could be. Anyway.
Yeah.
Who would we be talking about?
I don't know. It's weird. I don't know. I feel like we may be talking about someone in particular.
Yeah, but I think it's that history thing that's really important, right? Because the most common other kind of game I see a lot of train gamers play besides train games is war games. Like, there's a definite link between those two. It's generally either like I'm a train gamer and a war gamer, a train gamer and a heavy Euro gamer, or I just play train games. But yeah, I think, I don't know, it can be maybe a little elitist too sometimes for some. Like, you can get to the point where you're like, I don't need an Asmodee product. You know,
yes, I do not
no, Andy, you never do that.
Never do that. Never.
Oh,
that's from Fantasy
Don't know anybody who's a train gamer that does that ever.
That's cute. It's cute.
Well, do we have any final thoughts on 18xx games in general before I collapse here and fall on the bed that's behind me?
I think my only final thoughts are to think about is, don't be afraid of trying them. Honestly, they're not. They have a reputation for being very hard and difficult, and they really aren't, as long as you kind of follow a sequence of steps. So if you start with a good introductory game, which they're out there now, like a 46 and 89, and get your feet under you, you can do these next step games. I kind of recommended, like Mexico, 56, 61, those kind of things. And then you can really branch out from there. And I mean, there's just a huge variety of them. And you could just stick with one. You could play a lot. I think both are valid strategies. I've tended to go with the play a whole lot of them variety. So I'm not really a master of any one 18xx game, but I just know all kinds of mechanisms. So when I sit down to a new one, I'm like, this is a merger game. Okay, this is what I can expect. I think that's a perfectly valid strategy as well. I would just say, don't be afraid of them, and don't be afraid of diving a little deeper with them, but just be kind of careful, do your research, and just understand that you're kind of in a niche within a niche, which means it's not going to be the same as your Fantasy Flight or your Asmodee things. Things are going to be more expensive. They're going to not necessarily be components you would expect for that price. And that's just kind of the deal of it. The way board games make money is by volume, right? Like, the more you can sell of it, the more the cost comes down per unit. You're not selling a lot of these games. I mean, most people that make train games, they don't do it to make money. They do it because they love making train games. And so there's kind of a passion in that community for the games you're playing that you may not find as much in some other locations of the gaming world. And that's kind of what makes it a beautiful thing for me. And also, when you sit down and play one of these, you could truly at the end of it say, I played with another person. I bested that person. Like, it wasn't a roll of the dice or a flip of the card or anything like that. We had a battle. This in 18xx, unlike a war game, it's not a battle of guns. It's a battle of economics. My strategy won. And that's kind of a fun thing to have, but just remember that's the kind of deal you're signing up for. And if you don't like that kind of interaction, then by all means, don't get into 18xx, and there's nothing wrong with that. But for those who will crave that kind of interaction, this is a really cool part of the hobby that I think is underserved still and underrepresented, but it's getting better.
Well, I think that it's starting to really get modern with the recent games that you're seeing coming out. I mean, I think that you're starting to see more crossover, more games that have like buzzwords that interest me. You know, like they're just interesting sorts of things. Like 1822, like you mentioned, that has like sort of companies made available at variable times. You know, like that would be something to be kind of unheard of. You know, there's randomness in 1822.
Oh, absolutely, in the way they come out, yeah. Or you even have now like the 18 Lilliput. Like I could see, so like that could be one I could see you really liking, Joe, because it's, from what I hear, it's going to give you that same feel, but it does it in 90 minutes instead of 4 to 5 hours.
Yeah.
But yeah, like that's supposed to be good. Or oh god, what was I had another one, but I can't remember it now.
Well, that's been this episode went a lot better than I thought it would. We talked a lot about 18XX, and I found a lot of it very fascinating. That's pretty cool. So, man, thanks, Andy, for deciding to join us on a Monday night of all nights.
Oh, yeah, remember, I'm an educator. I just get to sleep in tomorrow, man.
Yeah, I get to do... I get to join you on Thursday.
Of course, sleep in means I have children, so I'll still be up at 6:30.
Oh, yeah. Well, you can't escape those for a while. And Joe, thanks for being on. Thanks for setting it all up. Always good to hear from you.
You too, sir. Thank you.
And why don't we just call that a wrap for this episode? What do you think, guys?
Sounds good. We'll have me on again after I get Joe to play 57, and we'll take photographic evidence of him destroying my
His eyes will be bleeding, going, "What did I do?" Okay, well, we'll call it a wrap. Thanks for being on, and we'll see you on the next episode of The Long View.
Yay.